Good evening. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call of tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Tonight we have, as we do every year, participants in the American Legion Boys and Girls State Program. And we have Tobin Hirsch to lead us in the pledge. So will everyone please rise as Tobin Hirsch leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And now Irv Porter will tell us a little bit about Tobin and his other participants in the American Legion programs.
So we can all see you. May I ask that all of the delegates that we have here tonight come up on the stage, please? Each September at this meeting, we have been proud to introduce Greenwich Boys and Girls State delegations that participated in Boys and Girls State earlier this year. And this year is a special year in that we sent 10 boys and girls, and of those 10, 6 were governors, representatives to Boys and Girls Nation, which is the federal sequel to Boys State. We had a controller on the girls' side and a controller on the boys' side. And all I can say is that as long as Livy and I have been doing this, we've never had that kind of recognition due totally to the quality of the people that we sent. And in that regard, now you ought to applaud. Boys State's been going on since 1934. Girls State a little bit later. We happen to have with us someone that went to Boys State in 1940 or 41, he's not sure. It may be that he was there for 2 years and he doesn't remember that. But I would ask that a dear member of your group stand and be recognized. That's a long time, and we're proud every year to recognize those that have come, and just in the interest of time, I cut that part short this year because Tom is pressed based upon the agenda that you guys have put in front of him. The programs are intended to bring together citizen leaders from all over the states, and all 50 states have a Boys and Girls State program, and all 50 states have a Boys and Girls Nation program. The premise for the program is that you learn by doing. So everything from the moment that you hit is related to doing. And it grows through the week until there's a political base on both sides with guidance from staff that I will say represents a good competitive basis for an election for all of the state offices. And one of the people on the stage who will take a step forward when I mention her name is, you want to say your name?
Izzy Kalb, is that who you're looking for?
That's it, you got it. Izzy ran for governor and lost by a very small margin. But the staff, as well as her peers, chose her as the girl that best represents Connecticut Girls State. So now you have met Now you've met Izzy, who goes to the academy. On the guy's side, the governor of Boise State that was chosen this year is Tobin Hirsch. He was also chosen by the staff to be the representative for Boys Nation. Tobin Hirsch. Emil Perdue was an active participant all the way through. Emil and Tobin both go to Greenwich High School. We also have a representative from Brunswick.
Wrong kid.
Not here. But the representation from Brunswick gives you an indication that we have, I guess, a commonality with all of the leaders of those schools to put forward candidates that are impact players. And a group of American Legion men and women will interview them with the questions that they're asked, having two objectives. One is to get them to remind themselves what it is that differentiates them, and number two, to favorably differentiate them versus their competition. So we never choose from a group so small that there's not competition, and that competition is purely a reflection on what the political process is all about. The other people that are on the stage are? Your name?
Speaker.
Say?
Justin Speaker.
Justin Speaker. And
I'm Julia Blank.
one more time.
Julia Blank.
Julia Blank. So we've been doing this for a lot of years. It gives us an opportunity. When I say we, I mean Livy Florin and I have been doing it for a lot of years. We haven't changed the process. Cream rises to the top. And that doesn't mean that these guys, don't know what a bottle of milk is, because they do. And having said that, all I can do is to say thank you to all of those that have participated over the years, either as a representative or in the process that we have. And how about another round of applause and congratulations?
1 minute. I have a question there, Mr. Porter.
Yes, sir.
Is it true Julia Blank was elected a senator?
We'll have to ask her.
Is that true?
Yeah, I went to girls.
And was she chosen to attend Girls Nation?
She was.
Did you mention that?
No, I didn't.
Well, that's pretty big.
You guys think you can get away with anything with this moderator? Thank you.
He promised me he was going to read his speech here. All right, I say that kiddingly. Irv Porter is the heart and soul of this program. He has been carrying it on for years and years. It's a wonderful program, encouraging civic involvement among our young people. So how about a hand for Irv Porter for the dedication he has shown us. Thank you very much. All right. Cindy, let me just say this other administrative details. All members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting. The reading of the call will be omitted. Cindy Anderson of the League of Women Voters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Anderson, and I've been a resident of this town since 1983. And our kids, through my husband's family, are actually the 6th generation of that family to grow up in town. I've been an active community volunteer, and one of the many things that I've been involved with is running the League of Women Voters for 6 years. The League is a nonpartisan political organization devoted to voter education. And one of the things that I used to tell my League members was a story about Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln was asked what he was going to do at the conclusion of his presidency. And, sadly, that didn't occur, but he did answer the question. And he said, I'm going to do the hardest job there is, and that is to be a citizen. And every one of you RTM members knows the truth to that statement, because it takes time and effort to be a good citizen, to find out the facts, to look at both sides of the issues, to process the facts, and come to a decision that makes sense. In 2013, and one other thing about a good citizen is that no one person, no political party, and no organization has a monopoly on good ideas. And good ideas can come from unusual places. In 2013, I was approached by Ann Wichman from District 5 to do a study of the RTM, for the League to conduct a study. And I said, okay, if you'll run it. And she agreed, and the League also agreed to support it. So we embarked on our study and formed a study committee. And on that committee were legendary RTM member Mary Ferry, Andy Deuce, Ann Wichman, of course, 4 prior League presidents, and myself. And we went out and gathered data. And the way we did that was we surveyed past and present members of the RTM. We also did a separate survey of district chairs. We interviewed stakeholders, interviewed BOE members, BET members, past and current selectmen, and we interviewed stakeholders in the town hall, department heads. We looked at other RTMs, and we analyzed election data. We synthesized all this information and wrote a study, which still can be found on our website. I think it's a little trickier to find than it used to be, but it's still there. And we came up with 14 recommendations. And we went through the pros and cons of each of these recommendations within our study as to our rationale. And those 14 recommendations were vetted by our membership and approved at our annual meeting in June 2016. And we have not changed a word of that study, and no outside group influenced our decision-making process for that study. Fast forward, we had the election of 2017, and then in 2018, the RTM Governance Committee was formed. And honestly, I was skeptical when that committee was formed because I thought, gee, does this really represent the current composition of the RTM? And is this going to be just a rubber stamp for the status quo? Well, I petitioned to present to that committee, and they very graciously welcomed me and gave me unlimited time to talk about our study, its methodology, our recommendations, and we had a Q&A. After that, I and my colleague, Yara Burnett, attended virtually all of the 27 meetings and 3 information sessions. And I can honestly say I was really impressed with the committee, with their dedication, with their open-mindedness, with their willingness to entertain all suggestions, and for their results orientation. They came up with 18 recommendations, as you know, and 4 of those overlap 4 of our recommendations. And as a League representative, I can only endorse the ones that we have studied and approved by our membership. And those briefly, because you're going to talk about them later, are every RTM member should have a town email address, eliminate thumbs up, thumbs down, increase the threshold from 5,000 to 25,000, and to have an annual meeting to educate the public about the RTM. As a citizen, I can say that genuine positive change happens very rarely. The last time this came before you was 10 years ago, and nothing really happened. I urge you to seize this opportunity. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your consideration.
Jill Oberlander, Chair of the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Many of you may already be aware, but I wanted to highlight that the BET is going to be holding a workshop on the Railroad Plaza development proposal this coming Thursday morning at 9 a.m. in the Town Hall Cone Room. It will be primarily a discussion amongst BET members at first. There will be representatives from the town as well as the developer in attendance, including the representatives from the both appraisal companies. I wanted to extend the invitation to RTM members to attend if they're interested. While it won't be a public hearing, at the end of the BET discussion, I will accept comments or questions from members of the public in attendance, RTM members. If you do want to attend and have a question in mind, if you would consider sending it to me beforehand, Jill.Oberlander at greenwichct.org, I believe, and so I can forward it to the town and make sure that they're prepared for the answer. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
In
Lucia
the cone
Jansen
room.
of District 7.
Good evening, RTM colleagues. It is with great sadness and heavy heart that District 7 inform you that this past summer, on August 11, 2019, our good friend and colleague, Margaret Freiberg, known as Peg, passed away at the early age of 71 years old. The district respectfully requests this tribute be recorded in the RTM minutes and a copy sent to her family. Peg was a compassionate, warm, and yes, a little idiosyncratic person who had a keen, scholarly mind and curiosity in many areas. She was a patron of the arts, opera and theater, and enjoyed reading history and anthropology. In 2010, she devoted herself to civic life by joining the RTM and served 8 years on a variety of RTM committees, including CDBG, Public Works, Legislative and Rules, and later the Claims Committee. I was fortunate to work with her on many projects and considered her a good friend and partner. As I began to learn more about my friend Peg, the more amazed I was of her. I learned that her erudite mind came from her parents, who prized education and were lifelong dedicated career civil servants. She grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, where her father worked for the U.S. Department of the Air Force in Operations Research, top secret, and her mother for the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission as the editor of an annual report, The Nuclear Industry. Peg was also a modern, pioneering woman ahead of her time. Far before it was cool for women to major in math and pursue careers in technology, Peg was one of the few women to graduate from Harvard in 1969 with a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and went on to work as a Fortran computer programmer. A few years later, in 1972, Peg changed her line of work entirely, went back to the university at Cornell Law School, again, one of only a handful of women to do so, and enjoyed a long, successful law career at IBM from 1975 until she retired in 2003. She was a working mother for most of her career and raised 3 wonderful children in Greenwich during the 1980s. She was very proud to share that from K through 12, all her children had attended Greenwich Public Schools and went on to successful careers, raise families, and good civic citizens. Peg was very engaged, principled, and conscientious while serving on the RTM and studied carefully the facts, no matter the sponsor or advocate involved. She often got up to speak to the body about the issues that mattered most to her, namely the environment, retaining the New England character of our town, and keeping Greenwich affordable for young families and senior citizens alike. The RTM in the town was all the better for Peg's passion, integrity, and intellect. I will miss you, Peg. We in District 7 will all miss you. Thank you.
Will the members please rise for a moment of silence in memory of Peg Freeberg. Thank you. Betsy Fruman, Chair of District 9.
Mr. Moderator, did I turn it off? It's on. Okay. District Line would like to remember a most amazing former member of our district. Mike Gulaski passed away in August at the age of 88. I know this is a long call, so I'll limit my remarks to just give you a taste of who Mike was and of his devotion to Greenwich. In the way of a really brief background, Mike was a Greenwich native. He went to New Lebanon, Greenwich High, got a degree in accounting from Iona, served in the Korean War, and he practiced trust and estate planning for Cummings and Lockwood. That does not really describe what Mike did for the RTM and for Greenwich. Long after he stopped being an RTM member, he continued to study every line of every budget. I think he knew in which budget we purchased every truck, and he could pull it from memory. He made sure that he questioned everything and helped us, the current RTM members and BET members, understand the possible unintended consequences of every item on the call, every change in the budget, or change in how we do business. Mike was the person who helped me understand how the town worked. The phone would ring and Mike would say, "Hi, Betsy, it's Mike Gulaski. Do you have a minute?" I knew I had to stop what I was doing, get out a pad and a pencil, sit down and listen for the next 45 minutes. At first, some of it was way over my head. But I listened. He was patient, and he could back up what he was saying with numbers and dates. It certainly was not only me that Mike was calling. I believe he checked his fact with town employees, and I know he called other RTM members and BET members. In fact, I would bet that he had Mike Mason on speed dial. Mike Gulaski loved Greenwich and was devoted to making Greenwich fiscally sound and responsive to the needs of the residents. He will be missed. District 9 asks that members of this body join with us in remembering Mike Gulaski and his devotion to Greenwich. We ask that these comments of remembrance be included in the minutes of this meeting.
Will the members please rise and join me in a moment of silence in memory of Mike Gulaski. Thank you. As all members have received a copy of the draft minutes of our June 10 meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Are there any proposed changes to those minutes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes stand adopted upon unanimous consent. All right, we have a long agenda. I have proposed that we organize it in a certain way. We may modify that as we go along. My proposal was to put on the consent calendar 4 items, items 2, 3, 5, and 24, and then combine in 3 separate groups because the outcome is expected to be different for those 3 groups. 3 of the Governance Committee recommendations will be combined in one group. Those are items on our call 7, 8, and 9. Another 2 will be combined. They are anticipated to be defeated, so they are being combined for one vote, items 10 and 11. And then we have a group of nominations, appointments, to be combined for purposes of postponement. And those are 1, 4, 25 through 30. And that would leave, if that is how we proceed, that would leave to consider separately items 6 and then 12 through 23. And it may be that we're going to postpone some of those items, but there are just so many different permutations, we'll take them up separately. All right, so at this point, pursuant to our rules, I will place on our consent calendar items 2, 3, 5, and 24. If they remain on our consent calendar, we will not hear any committee reports or have any discussion on those items. So the first item to be placed on the consent calendar, item number 2, is the appointment of Louise Puchel to be a regular member of the Board of Nathaniel Witherell, with a term beginning July 1, 2019 and expiring June 30, 2020. Next, item 3, the appointment of Thomas Zach to be a regular member of the Alarm Appeals Board for a term beginning July 1, 2019 and expiring June 30, 2023. Item 5 is the appointment of Richard Kaplan to be a regular member of the Board of Nathaniel Witherell, with a term beginning July 1, 2019 and expiring June 30, 2022. And the final item that I will designate for our consent calendar is item 24, and that is the appropriation of $450,000 for the Byram Fire Station Rehabilitation Project. Is there any objection to the designation of those 4 items for our consent calendar? Hearing none, will our district chairs please mark your voting cards. Consent calendar items 2, 3, 5, and 24, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right. Next, I will recommend that we combine items 7, 8, and 9 for voting purposes. Is there a motion to that effect? It has been moved and seconded to combine items 7, 8, and 9 for voting purposes. Motion to suspend the rules is not itself debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of combining items 7, 8, and 9, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion has carried. So we will begin now with item 7, and I know our governance committee has designated various people to present this, so
I'm here.
Lisa Stewart is going to present this item.
Good
Thank you.
evening. I'm Lisa Stewart from District 11. Resolved that rules of the RTM Appendix B, Section F and Section H be amended to include that the Land Use Committee and the Parks and Recreation Committee have operational and budgetary oversight for the Harbor Management Commission.
All right, that being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second and is currently before us.
When the Governance Committee was reviewing the responsibilities of all of our standing committees in Appendix B, we discovered that the Harbor Management Commission was not covered by any RTM standing committee. Call items related to the Harbor Management Commission are referred to Parks and Rec and Land Use. Thus, we recommend that the RTM Appendix B reflect that these 2 committees have operational and budgetary responsibilities for the Harbor Management Commission. This change ensures that harbor management is handled by the RTM like all other boards and commissions. Thank you.
Thank you. And the committees that considered these, if you want to come up and give your reports. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, we took up this item last Monday evening, and for this and all other matters concerning rules changes, we had Alexis Volgaris from the Governance Committee helping us with these. This item is merely a housekeeping item, making sure that there's budgetary and operational oversight for the Harbor Management Commission, which is a relatively new commission, and this just addresses who's going to be responsible for it. Our vote on this was 12-0-0. We're in favor of this. However, we noted that there were some mistakes in drafting that at the appropriate time I will ask the moderator to allow me to make the amendments.
Thank you. Andy Chapin, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
As Mr. Wells said, we took this up, and it appeared to us to be perfectly logical in housekeeping. We voted in favor, 11-0-0, District 4 absent.
Thank you. And Peter Berg with the Land Use Committee report.
The Land Use Committee's vote on this item was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Mr. Wells?
When the Governance Committee drafted this, I think they deleted financial responsibility under the land use portion. If you look on page 3 of the call, where it says overlapping responsibilities, in the appendix now it says for financial items over $50,000, with the Finance Committee. So that should be reinserted. And our committee voted on that, as well as one other notation that we made is they put the Parks and Recreation Committee and the Land Use Committee all in caps, whereas in the rest of the appendix, only the first letter of those items is capitalized and the rest is lowercase. And so we moved to make that change, 12-0-0, and I so move.
All right. Is there any need to repeat those proposed amendments? Is there any objection to those amendments? Hearing none, they may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Thank you. Discussion on item 7. Item 8 now comes before us. Tom Broadhurst of the Governance Committee.
Resolved that Section 3D2 be added to the rules of the representative town meeting to read as follows. 2. All meetings of RTM committees and subcommittees shall be held in public buildings or places. Meetings shall not be held in a private residence.
Thank you. That, again, being offered by one of our committees, does not require a second and is currently before us. May we hear the reports of the committees that would like to give reports, beginning with Mr. Wells.
This item we thought made good sense. We voted unanimously in favor of it, but we also saw perhaps that the way it was drafted by the Governance Committee wasn't quite inclusive enough. While it indicates that all meetings should be held in public buildings or places, it goes on to say meetings shall only be held in a private residence. We thought it should also reflect that you could have a meeting in what is a private place, but not within a residence. So we added language, or other place not open to the public. Our vote on this amendment, and as amended, was 12-0-0, and at the appropriate time, I'll make that change.
Thank you. Arlene Lamazo with the Public Works report.
Public Works took this up, and with no discussion, we voted 12-0-0.
Health and Human Services took this up as well. 11-0-0, District 3 was absent.
Peter Berg.
Land use vote on this item was 11 in favor, 1 opposed. The 1 opposed had to do with clarifying the need to clarify the definition of a public place. I believe the legislative and rules comment on this is going to address that concern.
Thank you. Josh Brown.
Labor contracts, 4-0-0.
Andy Chapin.
Parks and Rec, 11-0-0, D4 absent.
Kim Blank.
The Education Committee vote was 11-0-0 with District 2 absent.
By the way, what I didn't mention was Julia Blank, who went to Girls Nation, related to that lady. John Eddy.
The Appointments Committee discussion on this item centered on one side the importance of having public meetings be in places not only where the public is welcome, but where it feels comfortable. However, one district in particular expressed concerns that for some districts there are not enough conveniently located public places for committees to meet, hence the practice of occasionally meeting in a member's home. The district, the committee voted 10-1-1 with the objecting district suggesting that the rule is not consistent with current district practices and did not see viable meeting places for that district.
Richard Newman, Town Services report.
Town Services voted 11-0-0 with District 4 absent.
Rob Pirelli-Minetti.
Yeah, the Finance Committee took this up. There were some question about whether public places included churches, but our vote was 12-0-0.
Alan Small, whose daughter went to Girls Nation several years ago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Transportation Committee voted 8-0-0 on this item. Thank you.
Lucia Jansen.
BOC took this up. It was 11-0-0. District 4 was absent.
Thank you. Mr. Wells.
On behalf of my committee, I vote that we add the language, as I indicated before, at the end of the sentence where it says private residence, add or other place not open to the public.
All right. That being offered by one of our committees doesn't require a second, is currently before us. Is there any objection to that proposed amendment? Hearing none, absent objection, that amendment stands adopted upon unanimous consent. Discussion on item 8. Item 9 now comes before us. Lucia Jansen.
The Governance Committee, of which I am a member, is proposing the following. During an election year, host at least one public presentation explaining what the RTM is and how to run for it. This presentation may be hosted by the moderator or RTM members designated by the moderator. The rationale is an informational presentation improves the RTM communication and outreach to the Greenwich community. It is important to provide citizens with an opportunity to learn about what the RTM is and how one can join the RTM. And as we heard earlier, it was one of the League of Women Voters' recommendations.
Thank you. Doug Wells with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
So we took this up item and passed it unanimously. However, as we normally do, made some changes. One change is substantive. The other two is just language change, or in one case to update the form that has to be filed. We talked about this, that the idea is to be able to have time when you find out that people aren't going to be running in a district to give the moderator or his designee the opportunity to discuss the RTM and what it means and to discuss the process. However, if you look to subparagraph B, it says before September 1 of an election year, the district chairman should poll incumbents to see if they're going to run. Since we all have to get our petitions in by September 15, we didn't think that really left enough time for the education process to happen in any meaningful way to help people decide whether they want to run, and then have them give them enough time to be able to petition onto the ballot. So we moved to change in subparagraph B from September 1 to July 1. The other change we made was in subparagraph D. It says in the second sentence, this process can be simplified by listing all candidates on a single petition. 25 signatures are required of registered voters in each district. We thought that was misleading. It seemed to indicate that a petitioner had to go to each and every district to collect 25 signatures. So we changed the language back to what was originally in the rule, and that is that district that the person is running for. And then finally, in subparagraph H, the Connecticut law requires all candidates to file Form B4. That's an outdated form. As you all know, we just all had to file Form SEEC Form 1. And so we made that change to conform with the present form that's required. Our vote on the amendment and as amended was 12-0-0.
Thank you. All right, that motion to amend item 9 is now before us. Any objection to that proposed amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is, I'm sorry. Mr. Rudolph, District 6. You want to amend an amendment?
Yeah, sorry about that. Mr. Moderator, the reason for the change in H was because the form had been outdated. If we move and put another form in there, one day it will become outdated as well. I suggest that we say to file the appropriate form with the town clerk and future-proof this paragraph.
Sounds smart. All right, while we typically don't take up motions to amend, I think we can make an exception here. Does everybody understand what Mr. Rudolph is suggesting? All right, is there any objection to his amendment of the Legislative and Rules Amendment? Hearing none, that motion to amend, this motion to amend is adopted. All right, further discussion on item 9, on the motion to amend. All right, is there any objection to this now amended motion to amend? That may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Thank you. All right, no further discussion on item 9. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined calendar items 7, 8, and 9, and proceed to poll your delegation. I do have the result of the vote on the consent calendar items. Those were 3 appointments and an appropriation. All the items 2, 3, 5, and 24. All those in favor, 189 in favor, 2 opposed, no abstentions. Those consent calendar items have carried. All right, moving on to the second group of combined items. That was items 10 and 11. Mr. May, member of our Governance Committee, with those items.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Item 10, resolved that Section 5D of the Rules of the Representative Town Meeting be amended to read as follows. Responsibilities of Committee Vice Chairman. In the absence or inability of the committee chairman, the vice chairman shall assume the responsibilities of the chairman. In the event that the chairman permanently vacates the position, the vice chairman shall automatically ascend to the office and the town clerk notified in writing.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of our committee is now before us. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this? I'm sorry, Mr. May, would you like to give the report of the Governance Committee?
Report of the Governance Committee. In response to the Governance Committee's efforts to seek input from a variety of stakeholders, the desire to improve the development of leadership within the RTM stood out as a recurring theme. However, Section 5, subsection D, responsibilities of the committee vice chairman, appears to be in conflict with this goal. The current rule does not provide for the direct succession of the vice chairman if the chairman permanently vacates the office. It should be the goal of the committee and the duty of the chairman to encourage and develop leadership capable of assuming the chairmanship when necessary. A person seeking the office of vice chairman should be someone desirous of further leadership positions, and those electing said person should be aware that the vice chair they elect is in direct line of succession.
All right. Mr. Wells?
We took up this item as one single vote. Our committee.
Are you talking about on 10 and 11?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking of let's get that in front of us as well. Is Mr. May? Yeah, why don't you present item 11? I assume many committees.
Item number 11 is basically the same, but it goes for instead of the committee chairs, it's vice chairs, it's district. Item 11, resolve that Section 4E of the Rules of the Representative Town Meeting be amended to read as follows. Responsibilities of a district vice chairman. In the absence or inability of the district chairman, the vice chairman shall assume the responsibilities of the chairman. In the event that the chairman permanently vacates the position, the vice chairman shall automatically ascend to the office and the town clerk so notified in writing. The explanation on this is identical with the exception of the Section 4E and the words district instead of committee vice chairs.
Thank you. So items 10 and 11 are now before us. Mr. Wells.
Our committee spent some time on this and came to the conclusion that we didn't need this rule change. Our vote on this was 1 in favor, 11 opposed, with District 7 being the only delegate voting in favor of the change. Generally, I think our committee felt as though there perhaps should be elections when there's a change at the top, and we think that that gives everybody an opportunity to reconsider who they'd like to run the committee or the district in the event that somebody had to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Arlene Lamazzo with the Public Works report.
Public Works took up this item. Our vote was 4-8-0. Districts who voted no were 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. Those voting no had a variety of reasons. One, the chair and vice chair do not run as a slate. Others said, it seems like you're creating a fiefdom. Some said it was not democratic. Some made the point that officers' elections are held after November when new members join the RTM, and therefore they would not be in a position to vote. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty Roberts with the Health and Human Services report.
We took up item 10. The vote was 2-9-0 with District 3 absent. Those voting no wanted to preserve their choice of chair to the time when they would be voting if someone resigned.
Peter Berg.
The Land Use Committee voted on item 10. Our vote was 3 in favor, 9 opposed. Districts 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 12 voted no for reasons that you've heard from the others. We did not take up item 11.
Mr. Pirelli Minetti.
The Finance Committee took this up. Our vote was 0 in favor, 12 opposed, and no abstentions. Most of the reasons you've already heard. A further reason, it was pointed out that if you had a strong vice chair, having a new election would not disadvantage that strong vice chair. If the vice chair was weak, having a new election would enable a committee or a district to find a new chair that was perhaps stronger, who showed up during the time period before the current chair had vacated. Thank you.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
The Appointments Committee took this up, and our discussion centered on pretty much the same reasons that you've, the same items and thinking that you've heard already. The vote was 0, 11, and 1, with District 1 abstaining.
Richard Newman with our Town Services report.
Town Services took up item 10. We voted against the item 3-8-0 with District 4 absent. As other people have stated, opponents thought committee should elect its own chair.
Lucia Jansen with the Budget Overview Committee report.
The BOC took this item up, and as you've heard from my colleagues, very similar sentiment. The vote was 2-9-0. District 6 and 11 voted yes.
Josh Brown, Chair of Labor Contracts.
Mr. Moderator, fellow guests, labor contracts was 1-3-0 with much of the same discussion. We also had a motion to make an amendment at the end of the paragraph to fix a grammatical error, but don't think that's appropriate this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Chapin with our Parks and Recreation report.
Parks and Rec took this issue up. We, in general, were very positive with the idea of grooming and training the next level of leadership, and we thought that was very important, whichever way this issue went. That being said, there were 2 in our committee that were against it for the reasons stated and wanted to have an election later on. Parks and Rec voted 9-0, District 4 absent.
Thank you. Alan Small with the Transportation Committee report.
Transportation Committee voted 3-5-0 on item 10, and we did not take up item 11. Thank you.
Kimberly Blank with the Education Committee report.
Hi, the Education Committee voted against this item 1-10-0 with District 2 absent. District 3 voted in favor of this because he has faith in the committee's ability to select a good vice chair. Others voted against it because they felt the committee should have the flexibility to choose the chair that they want, and noted that it's not time-consuming to hold an election for a new chair.
Thank you. Discussion on items 10 and 11. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined calendar number 2, items 10 and 11, and proceed to poll your delegation. I do have the results of the vote on combined calendar number 1. Those were items 7, 8, and 9. Those in favor, 189. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 0. Those items have carried. All right. Now, combined calendar number 3 was to group together the appointments that were to be postponed. And I've got too many papers up here. All right, so that was, help me out here, that was item 1, 4, 25 to 30. All right, and those are all being postponed to the same next meeting? All right, so then why don't we take those up as a combined calendar? So, item number 1, was that postponed originally?
Yes.
No.
That was previously postponed, Mr. Moderator.
All right, it doesn't say that. Is that?
Yeah, from June.
All right, so item 1 had been postponed from our June meeting, so that is now before us, and that is a resolution appointing Serdar Umar to be a regular member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring March 31, 2023. Item number 4, was that also postponed? All right, so that was also postponed. That is a resolution appointing Andrew Bronin to be a regular member of the Board of Health for a term beginning July 1, 2019 and expiring June 30, 2023. That is now before us. All right, item 25. Mr. Toner, John Toner, our selectman, has that resolution.
Excuse me while I put on my coat. It's hot in here, and I didn't want to put it on before I had to. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term beginning November 1st, 2019 and expiring on October 31st, 2020.
All right. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 25 has been moved and seconded and is currently before us. All right, since we're going to postpone these, Mr. Toner, why don't you just offer all of them?
Okay. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term beginning November 1st, 2019 and expiring October 31st, 2022, Nicholas Macri. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternative member to the Harbor Management Commission for a term beginning upon appointment and expiring. The beginning of the appointment is
beginning upon appointment, so it won't start until we actually appoint.
And expiring March 31st, 2022. B. Jefferson Parker, Jr. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term beginning upon appointment and expiring June 30th, 2022, Suzanne Brown. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term beginning November 1st, 2019 and expiring October 31st, 2020, Christopher Carter. And item number 30 has been withdrawn.
All right, thank you very much. So will a member please move the adoption of items 26 through 29? Items 26 through 29 have been moved and seconded, and now before us, combined all together, are items 1, 4, and 25 through 29. Mr. Eddy.
The Appointments Committee voted to postpone each of these items until the October meeting.
All right. That being offered on behalf of our committee doesn't require a second. Discussion on the motion to postpone? I can call, I'm sorry, Mr. Berg.
The Land Use Committee did interview Ms. Albin and Mr. Parker, and I will, both of them were unanimous. I'll give the report next month.
All right, I do know other committees did interview some of these candidates, but if we're going to postpone them, why don't we just hold? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I will call for a voice vote on the motion to postpone these items to our October meeting. All those in favor of postponing items 1, 4, 25 through 29 to our October meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion to postpone has carried. All right. I think did I read? Yes, I did. Okay. So we are still tabulating the vote on combined calendar number 2. We have disposed of the other appointments. We're now ready to take up the separate items, beginning with item 6. Tom Cornelius, member of the Governance Committee, with that item.
Resolved that the number of delegates on the Labor Contract Committee increase to 7. The RTM Rules, Section 6, Special Committee, Subsection A2, composition to read. The Governance Committee is recommending expanding the number of delegates in the labor contract to 7 delegates and 2 alternates. Labor contracts are very important and very complicated. With that in mind, it only makes sense that the more eyes on the contracts, the more efficient that group can work.
All right, will a member please move the adoption? All right, no, that is being offered by one of our committees. It does not require a second, and item 6 is now currently before us. Josh Brown, chair of our, are you offering this as labor contracts?
Labor
Chair?
contracts.
All right.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, labor contracts took this up and voted against the item 130. The rationale is that the work of labor contracts, it requires specialization. Certain types of skills are best put on the committee to help a diverse and robust conversation. We had heard as part of the input process to the governance committee that there needed to be better communication coming out of labor contracts to the districts. And the sense of labor contracts, well, I'll get to the labor contracts. Sorry, Mr. Moderator, confused. I'm presenting the item on behalf of the Labor Contracts Committee. Sorry. I'll take a pause. So we voted against it because increasing the number doesn't necessarily improve the type of communication. There have been a number of changes in labor contracts and the manner in which we communicate that we believe is showing some improvement. It's not, maybe perfect, but it's heading in the right direction. Adding more people didn't seem that it was going to result in the desire and create a greater challenge in finding people with skills that would contribute well to the diverse and open conversation around the labor contracts. So that is the discussion. It was 130, and at the appropriate time, we also made an amendment to add a sentence at the end of the paragraph that I'll offer at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Richard Newman, Susan Fahey, could you come forward, please? Richard Newman with the report of our Town Services Committee.
Town Services took up this item. We voted 11-0-0 in favor. Our committee felt the increase of delegates would help the Labor Contract Committee do a more consistent job of informing the RTM and helping the districts and committees understand the contracts. We also thought we could possibly diversify the specialists that they talked about within the Labor Contracts Committee. Thank you.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Appointments Committee had the benefit of the presence of Josh Brown of the Governance Committee to clarify information and explain the committee's rationale. At that time, Josh, we did not thank you, so I'd like to thank you now for spending that time with you that evening with the Appointments Committee. I apologize for neglecting to do that. The committee understood that the genesis of this recommendation to be the Governance Committee's desire to respond to the call from many members of the RTM for more diversity of opinion on items with a financial component. pointing particularly to the significant overlap on the membership on the Labor Contracts Committee with the BOC and the Finance Committee. There was an objection from the member of District 1 as to the legality of the current practice of having the appointment of newly re-elected Labor Contracts Committee members extended into the next term until the RTM makes new appointments. This was discussed briefly and put aside. In its discussion, the committee expressed an appreciation for the benefits of securing specific diversity in the skill sets of the Labor Contracts Committee members and a desire to obtain a much greater range of voices and district representation than those already serving on the Finance Committee and the BOC. On the other hand, the concerns about the challenges experienced by the Appointments Committee in the current term to identify a diverse group of candidates interested in filling 7 positions, we doubted that simply increasing the number of members could accomplish the goal of this resolution. The committee also gave consideration to the concern that security and confidentiality are inversely proportional to the number of members who have access to this information that the committee is responsible for. The vote was 3, 8, and 1. The 2 minority votes in favor represented the opinion that more members would in fact provide better diversity and reporting, and the member of District 1 abstained for the reasons explained earlier.
Mr. Pirelli-Minetti with the Finance Committee report.
Yes, the Finance Committee took this up. We had Josh Brown, who's from the Labor Contracts Committee and the Governments Committee, and also a member of the Finance Committee. We discussed this. This is actually a close question between all of the various considerations of confidentiality, expanding opportunities, and the difficulty of finding good people to put on to the Labor Contracts Committee. But on balance, our committee voted in favor of the item 7 to 4, 7 in favor, 4 against, with 1 abstention. Districts voting against were districts 5, 6, 8, and 9, with District 7 abstaining.
Thank you. Lucia Jansen with the BOC report.
Hi. The BOC liked the spirit of this item, so we started out by saying, isn't it great to have more opportunities for leadership, also more eyes and analysis on these important labor contracts. So we like, in general, the spirit. The con was truly just kind of, it is somewhat difficult to attract members, and also sometimes it's hard to get quorum, because these contracts come in and you have to quickly assemble people. But weighing the pros and cons, we unanimously voted 11-0-0 in support of adding these 2 new members. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Wells with our Legislative and Rules report.
Our committee apparently thought that if 7 is good, 9 would be better. So we moved to amend this item to change the number from 7 to 9. Not sure when you'd want me to make that amendment now, or if you want to take a vote as it's drafted at this time.
Yes, I'll take up the amendment. I know, Mr. Brown, you also have an amendment, but that applies generally no matter what the size is. So why don't we take up the size?
Okay. So our committee moved on a motion from District 12, which was seconded by District 6, to change the number from 7 to 9. The vote in favor of this motion was 7 to 5, with 4 districts, my district, 5, 7, 8, and 11 voting no. And then the vote on the merits as amended was 7-5, with the same districts voting no.
All right, so that motion to amend from 7 to 9 has been offered by one of our committees, does not require a second, and is currently before us. I will now open up for discussion on this amendment going from 7 to 9. So we did have some speakers sign up for item 6 in general. If any of you want to address this, please come forward. I see Glenn Canner. You're speaking on. We are now speaking on the amendment from 7 to 9. Yes. Glenn Canner.
Good evening. Glenn Canner from District 12. Earlier this summer, I thought I saw a preliminary report of the Governance Committee, and it seemed to suggest that there was a motion to expand the labor contracts to 10 members. I said, that sounds right. The town charter provides for 2 special committees, Claims Committee and Labor Contracts. I've had the honor for sitting for 10 years on the Claims Committee. I believe it is a very effective committee. They entertain very serious matters, serious claims against the town. There are 9 RTM members and the moderator. We never have a problem convening a quorum. We both get into the details. We work with the town attorney, get into the details of the litigation. But most importantly, we make a collective decision on whether to settle, what to settle for, or whether to go to trial. Respectfully, I believe that the labor contracts is very similar. You're dealing with 2/3 of the town budget. You're dealing with a situation where there is the minutia of the contracts, which is very important, but there also is the collective decision whether to settle or go to arbitration. In view of the large proportion of the town's budget, I submit that the number of 5 should be increased, and in view of the fact that I believe that it's recognized that claims that does their work very effectively, I would submit that the number be increased to 9. Initially, I had proposed at Legislative and Rules that it be increased to 10, and there was a suggestion that 9 would be better for a vote. But I would request that you follow the model of the Claims Committee. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to amend from 7 to 9. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Labor Contracts Committee didn't take up this motion, but we did look at increasing it by 2 to 7. So this would make it even a greater challenge to find people with unique skills in negotiating contracts. It's not just a financial aspect of it, but it's a strategy of what are the kinds of benefits that we should be offering to employees. What if we're going to spend $1 for a benefit, what's the best benefit that we can get, and to work through that. So getting members that have contract negotiation experience, that were heads of HR or talent or people, other types of looking at health benefits, actuarial, those are the kinds of skills that benefit the labor contracts, and increasing the number for the sake of increasing the number I don't think is going to behoove or benefit the RTM in creating a diverse discussion. I can't say that the labor contracts would vote against this item because it didn't, but it certainly voted against the item to increase to 7. So the direction would be would be harder to get to 9. So please don't support this motion.
I do just want to point out, I am chair by rule of the Claims Committee, and I do just want to point out a fundamental difference between the Claims Committee and every other committee. The Claims Committee actually acts in place of the 230 members, and so its size, in creating that, the idea was you don't want to get rid of 230 votes and go to too small a number. So, there's a whole different consideration in putting that number together than our advisory committees. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I just think the comparison is not perfect. David Detchen, District 10.
I don't necessarily have a dog in this hunt since this is my last term in the RTM after 20 years, but I do want to make 4 observations based on my 20 years on the LCC. Number 1, the LCC already has 7 members. The 2 alternates participate in all discussions, and their votes and reasoning are noted in our reports to the RTM. This has been LCC tradition for decades, precisely because we're a small committee. Number 2, apparently this proposal is motivated or triggered to some degree by a lingering resentment over the fact that for many years 3 of the 7 members of labor contracts came from District 10. That situation arose many years ago when few people wanted to be on the RTM. We had trouble finding enough people to serve on the RTM many years ago. And District 10 happened to have lawyers and retired businessmen who did have experience in contract negotiations and collective bargaining, and they wanted to put their experience to the town, to the benefit of the town. Remember, it was the Appointments Committee, not District 10, that decided that those individuals were qualified to serve on the LCC. Currently, 2 of the 7 members on the LCC are from District 10. And after 31 December 2019, there will be only 1 member from District 10 on the LCC. The right way to address this issue of over-concentration is to discuss it and deal with it at the start of each term in the context of the nomination process of the Appointments Committee. Number 3, increasing the number of members does not solve the issue of transparency or communication. First of all, much of what the LCC does is by definition confidential and not transparent. And that will remain so no matter how many members the LCC has, whether it's 7, 9, or 11. Moreover, that confidentiality is to some degree different from that of the Claims Committee. In the LCC, confidential strategic matters may cut across a whole series of labor contracts with many different collective bargaining units, and though that information may need to remain confidential for many months or even years. The more members, the greater the risk that confidentiality will be undermined over time. In addition, the LCC has already taken steps to improve transparency and transfer of information. It now issues written reports on the actions taken by the LCC. It has appointed liaison to certain standing committees. And each term there is a town hall information center session of the LCC for all RTM members. Interestingly, the attendance at those town hall sessions is usually not all that great, even though every member of the RTM is invited. Number 4, and finally, the LCC doesn't just vet contracts already negotiated. In addition, the BOE and the town negotiator, before negotiations begin with a union, come to the LCC and they disclose their confidential short and long-term negotiating strategies to the LCC. And then they ask the LCC to advise them on the basis of the expertise of the various LCC members about our views on their particular negotiating strategy, whether we think it's wise, unwise, whether it admits certain important issues that ought to be addressed in the negotiations or whatever. As a consequence, the members of the LCC need to bring expertise to those confidential confirmations. This is not amateur hour. And it is various kinds of expertise. It may be law, it may be contract negotiations, it may be human resources, it may be collective bargaining negotiations, it may be benefits, it may be pension structure, it may even be actuarial experience and other important areas. And interestingly enough, with our 7 members, over the 20 years I've been on the LCC, it is remarkable the diversity of experts that we've had on the LCC who have expertise that is relevant to labor contract negotiations. In addition, those who serve on the Labor Contracts Committee need to be aware that the negotiation of labor contracts with municipal unions is quite different from labor negotiations in private industries. due to the state law regulating labor contract negotiations and arbitration. We are already having difficulty filling the 7 positions we now have with individuals who have the requisite experience and who can consistently be available to attend the meetings of the LCC when called. In summary, this increase, whether it's to 9 or to 11, is unnecessary. It undermines the goals of confidentiality, and it does not resolve the issues that are ostensibly the reason for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Swamley, District 10.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is a solution in search of a problem. The Labor Contracts Committee is a specialized committee needing specialized backgrounds. Everyone agrees. Last spring, there was a very lively discussion concerning the fact that LCC was becoming overweight with people having a financial background, specifically members of the BOC and finance. We bemoaned the fact then that people with human services backgrounds, benefits backgrounds, negotiating backgrounds were hard to find in the RTM. Increasing the number under these conditions is not going to solve this problem. We are not going to be able to manufacture people with these expertises just because we increase the size. I urge this body to keep it at 5. If and when it becomes clear that we have that warrants raising it, consider it then. But for right now, we don't need to expand this committee. Thank you.
Mr. Pirelli-Minetti, are you waiting to speak?
Not on this one.
Lucia Jansen? Yes.
Hi, I'm Michael Spilo. I'm an alternate on the Labor Contracts Committee, and I disagree with much of what has been said before. I don't believe that the confidentiality aspect is an issue at all. Clearly, the Claims Committee also has extensive discussions of a confidential nature, and having 10 people has not ever been a problem as far as I'm aware. I also think that the confidential nature of the information discussed at labor contracts is, let's say, overstated, so that actual negotiating tactics are rarely discussed, and subject matter of the negotiation and the specifics of the negotiation are also rarely discussed. I can tell you that as someone who is neither from a financial background nor from a legal background, and yet I feel I have a lot of experience in both labor matters as an entrepreneur and employer, that there's room for more opinion and more diversity of opinion within that committee, and expanding the size of the committee would not be a problem. And in fact, the vote that was taken is really 3 members, which is not broadly representative of much of anything on this body of 230. So I would urge expansion of the committee to include more voices and to allow for more people to participate in the process. I can also tell you that having recently been an applicant to this committee, it was significant. The application process was significantly oversubscribed, and there is really no problem finding people, and in this town, finding highly qualified, very educated, highly intelligent, with lots of experience. Lots of those people were available and were applying for the position on LCC, and the appointments committee had a very difficult time making a decision. So I think none of the arguments against increasing the size are valid, and I do think that as a member of District 11, having had a LCC member before I joined and continuing to have an LCC member now, District 11 is slightly more informed than potentially other districts who do not have such a member participating. So I think it is a valid concern and a valid addition. Thank you.
Betsy Fruman, District 9.
For years, I've been talking about labor contracts. And I think increasing the size, I would urge you to increase the size. What the previous
Right now,
people...
everybody understands. We're only talking about going from 7 to 9, right? Okay.
7 to 9. The previous...
It's currently 5. And
5
there
is
was
a different
proposal
vote.
to go to 7. Right,
7
that's
to
before us,
9.
and now this is to amend 7 to 9. Okay.
The previous people spoke about the sexy side of labor contracts. Their real job is to inform us, the RTM members, as to what is in that contract. Now, you just heard David say that he holds these meetings and nobody comes. I know nobody comes because I think Carol and I were the only two at the last one. There were very few people. It's their job to come out to the districts and talk to the districts and answer their questions. That can be better done if they have 9 regulars and 2 alternates. I urge you to vote to increase this to 9.
All right, there were people who signed up, so we'll call those names, give them an opportunity here. Dan Quigley, to be followed by Romulo Samaniego. No? All right, Mr. Samaniego? No? David Etten? All right, are there any others who would like to address this motion to amend item 6 to go from 7 to 9? All right, we will take a vote on that motion to amend. This is the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend item 6. If you want, now, we're not voting on the merits of anything yet. It's just, do you want to take that number 7 in item 6 and change it to 9 before we take a final vote? Does everybody understand? Yes says you do want that. So you want to have a chance to vote on increasing to 9. No means you would leave it at 7 for now in the resolution, and then we'll take a vote on that. All right, so will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend. Uh-oh. Oh, okay. To amend item 6. And proceed to poll your delegation. We will need to await the result of this vote before we can take up a final vote on item 6. So I ask that our chairs please expedite this vote on the motion to amend item 6. All right. Mr. Brown has reminded me that the Labor Contracts Committee motion to amend is independent of what the number is, has to do with the composition. So I'd ask that you continue voting on the Legislative and Rules motion to amend, and we will take up the Labor Contracts Committee motion to amend. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, Labor Contracts Committee voted to make an amendment to this item, specifically dealing with the overlap with other committees, being able to create additional leadership. And you've heard it by previous speakers that this is a premier type of committee where people seek to be a participant in it. And so having people that are not members or at least officers of other committees would again encourage greater participation, greater leadership potential for our members. So Labor Contracts voted 3 in favor, 1 opposed, to make an amendment adding a new sentence at the end of the item that reads, members of the Labor Contracts Committee should not be officers of other committees. So that is the motion of labor contracts.
All right. Has everyone heard what this proposed amendment is? All right, we need to repeat it, Mr. Brown.
The motion or the item to amend is to add a sentence at the end of the item that reads, members of the Labor Contracts Committee should not be officers of other committees. And again, this is to create a diversity of opinion and reduce overlap with other committees and create leadership opportunity.
Is that should or shall?
Should. It is not absolute. There can be situations where you might need to have a qualified individual that may serve as an officer in other committees that would be a contributor, valuable contributor to this committee. So we saw it as a should, not a shall.
All right. So the proposed amendment is the members of the Labor Contracts Committee should not be officers of other committees. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second, and that motion to amend is now before us. Discussion on that, on the Labor Contracts motion to amend. Mr. Pirelli-Minetti, who himself is an officer of a committee on the Labor Contracts Committee.
I suppose I should admit my interest on this to begin with, in the sense that I am the one member of the Labor Contracts Committee who voted against this proposed amendment. And I would strongly urge you not to approve this amendment. It's ironic that the members of the Labor Contracts Committee voted against expanding the size of the committee because they said it was, in the context of the conversations, people have said it was hard to find enough qualified people, and then they want to turn around and make it harder to find qualified people by saying, well, we shouldn't have members of or officers of the standing committees. That strikes me as rather odd, and I think that it's unnecessary. What's even worse about it is they wouldn't even offer it as a shall motion. They offered it as a should motion. That's a precatory motion. It has no force. It's just you ought to do this. Well, we shouldn't be in the business of making RTM rules that simply say you should do this. I think that historically, many of the members of labor contracts have been officers of other committees. My predecessor as chair of finance, Mike Warner, spent a number of years on the Labor Contracts Committee, and so have a number of other officers of other standing committees. This, to me, is a solution in search of a problem, in the sense that I think that the Appointments Committee, which works very hard to vet the various nominees or applicants for labor contracts, to find the most qualified people, and they really shouldn't have artificial constraints about whether those candidates are officers of other standing committees or not. Thank you.
All right, everybody's. Mr. Brown?
A question was asked by officer, what did we mean? It would be a secretary, vice chair, or chair.
Thank you. All right. Yes, sir.
Henry Orfis, District 7. I encourage you to oppose this motion. Although it may be well-meaning, it seems to me that whenever a new RTM is formed and new committees are formed, the members of those committees should be free to choose without constraint or discouragement any officers they choose, regardless of what other committees, including labor contracts, on which those members serve. Thank you.
Mr. Spilo?
So I don't really see any reason for this rule to be applied to this committee and not to other committees. And if you want to have diversity of leadership positions within the RTM, that's a good goal, and there's lots of ways to accomplish that. I think this would be one of the worst ways to accomplish that. We could have term limits for chairs, vice chairs, and secretaries. We could have the limit of one leadership position across all committees. So you could be on as many committees as you'd like, but you can only be the leader of one committee. That makes sense to me too. But saying that you can't join a committee because you're a leader of some other committee, that really doesn't accomplish increasing leadership opportunities, and it does limit the ability to run for LCC, and I don't see what makes LCC special in this regards when compared to all other committees on the RTM. And if you look at it, generally speaking, there are 84 leadership positions, 86 if you count the moderator and moderator pro tem positions in the RTM, and there's no reason to exclude those 86 people from being able to be members of the LCC. We're not talking about being chair of the LCC. We're talking about just being a member, and I don't really see what makes this special or unique in any way.
Can we have the person from District 8 who was taking the vote on this current thing? Thank you. Alice Duff, District 7, speaking on the labor contracts motion to amend item 6.
I'm only speaking to say I agree with everything that's been said in opposition to this suggestion. I do serve on appointments. It is not easy to find well-qualified people, and a lot of the people who are well-qualified have already been recognized as leaders on their current committees. So that's who we have to go with. Let's not lose them. Thank you.
Nancy Duncan, District 2. Nancy Burke, wife of Duncan.
Nancy Burke, District 2, and I think great arguments have already been made against this amendment. But I would go on to say that it has been mentioned that the director of the labor contracts is the one who negotiates with our unions, and he negotiates for the town of Greenwich. And right now, we do not have a known director of the labor unions contracts, and I think that we're very, very lucky to have the expertise we have on this committee. All those people who are serving now are really outstanding individuals with financial backgrounds and other that really contribute. So I don't know why we need a restrictive amendment like this. Thank you.
Thank you. David Detchen.
Well, let me show you the other side of the coin. I wish to speak in favor of the amendment proposed by the LCC. And obviously the use of the word should means that it is precatory, and this is really intended in large degree to be a sort of a policy statement to the Appointments Committee, which is in fact the committee which does nominate the members for the LCC, and they have this task before them come February and March of next year. There are 3 committees in the LCC, in the RTM, that focus almost exclusively on financial matters. Those are BOC, Finance, and LCC. But there's an important difference between the LCC's mission and the missions of the other 2 financial committees. Specifically, while the BOC and Finance focus on the budgetary aspects of the town's finances, the LCC focuses exclusively on the negotiation of the town's labor contracts, examining issues such as, is the BOE or the town negotiator negotiating the right issues with the union? Has the BOE or the town negotiator reached a result in negotiations that is the best possible result in light of the state law on labor contract negotiations and arbitration? Third, is it better to accept the contract as it has been negotiated as the best possible result? Or can the BOE or the town achieve a better result by taking an issue to arbitration, especially if they take it to arbitration before the contract has been fully negotiated? Let me be direct. It is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to make the negotiation of labor contracts a part of the budgetary process. Here's why. If we go to a union and say to the union reps, we'd like you to accept a 0.5% increase in wages, since that's our budgetary goal that we've established for the town for the coming fiscal year. The response of the union reps will be, we don't really care about your budgetary goals. We're here to get the best possible contract for our members. And you can't force us to accept your wage proposal. And if you try, we'll take you to arbitration, and the arbitrators will smack the town down if the town's proposal of 0.5% is too far from the wage trends that are being agreed to in other parts of town. As a result, while the LCC wants labor contracts to have the lowest possible impact on the town's budget, that's part of our goal. We want the labor contracts to have the lowest possible impact on the town's budget. But what the LCC needs is members who can focus completely on the negotiating process and not be distracted or conflicted with issues from other committees. For example, how likely is it that an officer of education, BOC, town services, or finance will be in a position to vote for a contract settlement in LCC because it is, in fact, the best possible negotiation result in light of state law, and then go back to his or her standing committee and say, well, I voted in the LCC for the contract because it's the best possible negotiating result, but now as an officer of this committee, I'm going to vote against the contract because it doesn't fit the budgetary goals or the education or town service policies that we wanted to achieve in that particular negotiation. When negotiated labor contracts come before the RTM should want to hear from the various committees with various perspectives, including budgetary, education, town services, or whatever. But it is also important that the RTM not be deprived of the independent perspective of the LCC, which is focused solely on the issue of whether the BOE or the town has achieved the best achievable result in light of the state labor law, contract and arbitration law, independent of what other burning issues there may be within the various standing committees. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's just hang tight here. Hang on a minute. I'm going to announce the results of the votes that we have currently. The result of the vote on combined group number 2, which was items 10 and 11, this was the vice chair ascending to chair in case of a vacancy. Those in favor, 21, opposed 170, abstaining 1. Those items have failed. The Legislative and Rules motion to amend item 6 to go from 7 to 9. Those in favor, 54, opposed 137, abstaining 2. That motion has failed. All right. Wynn McDaniel, District 7.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator and members of the RTM. I would like to make a motion to limit debate for the balance of the meeting for each speaker to 3 minutes.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to limit debate for the balance of the meeting to 3 minutes per speaker. Ms. McDaniel, per motion? Ms. McDaniel? This is 3 minutes per speaker per motion. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to limit debate is not itself debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. In the first instance, I will call for a voice vote. If you are in favor of limiting debate for the balance of the meeting to 3 minutes per speaker, you should vote in favor. All those in favor of limiting debate for the balance of the meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. All right. Further discussion on the LCC motion. Lucia Jansen, a member of the LCC and chair of the BOC.
Hi, I wasn't going to speak tonight, but some of the things said earlier prompted me. I am an LCC member. I was absent the night of the vote. I would have voted against this motion. And I just want to give you a little bit of history about me when I started with labor contracts. I am a former technology executive. I'm very comfortable with technology, reading contracts, personnel issues. I served on the Parks and Rec Committee the first 6 years of my RTM experience. After 2 years, I was made secretary. I was a fresh new member and I was made secretary. I was very excited, very enthusiastic. I found out about these labor contracts, this really important work that the RTM does. I have said to many, many times, it is our most important work, is the labor contracts, aside from capital analysis. I started with my experience in understanding technology and contracts to research in the 21st century environment. When previous speakers say that a lot of the information is confidential, that is just not the case today. Every town publishes their labor contracts. They are available online. One of the most important functions is to understand how the other towns are paying for all benefits, all terms, be it soft terms or hard terms, financial terms. And what I have done over the years is create white papers. And for many of you who have read them, I mean, they are very easy to read, benchmarking analysis of how we are doing as compared to our peers. So I just wanted to say, a fresh new face at 2 years into the RTM was working with this labor contract area. It wasn't because I was a chair of a committee or I was an officer, and I would hate to see limiting participation on the labor contracts to officers when there really is, if there are individuals out there who have the energy and an expertise, I say bring them on. Thank you.
Mr. Quigley, did you want to speak? Dan Quigley, District 1. 3 minutes, 3-minute limit.
3 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Welcome back. Missed all you guys this summer. Just want to say a few quick words. I think this kind of boils down to a simple issue. We've heard tonight from the labor contracts people, we don't want to expand the size of the committee. We want to limit the kind of people who can come in. They can't be officers. I think this kind of language is contrary to what the RTM stands for. We've all heard people talk about limiting and reducing the size of the RTM, and less is better, and streamline it, and it's too many people. I disagree with that. I think if you have people in the RTM who are officers of other committees and they're committed and interested in being on the Labor Contracts Committee and they offer something that gets them elected to that committee, they ought to be able to participate, because we need the best people we have in this body to represent the people of the town on the various committees. And limiting it in terms of size, scope, personnel, because we think there could be confidentiality breaches or other reasons that seem to be kind of cherry-picked out of thin air, I think is contrary to what the RTM stands for. I think you should vote to allow officers of other committees to join the Labor Contracts Committee. Thanks.
Are there any other speakers on this motion to amend? Will the district chairs? All right, so I'm calling for a vote on the Labor Contracts Committee motion, which adds the language, members of the Labor Contracts Committee should not be officers of other committees. If you are in favor of that language being added to item 6, you vote yes. If you are against it, you vote no. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Labor Contract Committee motion to amend item 6 and proceed to poll your delegation. We will need to await the result of that vote before we can proceed further, so please expedite that. I guess now would be an appropriate time, if you have voted, to get up and stretch. Ms. Voulgaris? All right, we have the result of the vote on the LCC motion to amend item 6. Those in favor, 43. Opposed, 145. Abstaining, 2. That motion to amend has failed. All right, that leaves item 6 as it appears on the call, increasing labor contracts to 7 delegates. Further discussion on item 6. Dr. Carlson, you had signed up to speak. 3 minutes.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, in the Iliad, Diomedes says 2 heads are better than 1. I say tonight, 7 members of the Labor Contracts Committee is better than 5. I have been involved for over 20 years in putting people on the Labor Contracts Committee in my service in the Appointments Committee. I've always thought that the Labor Contracts Committee needed some form of democratization. It needed to expand a little bit. We have had a problem through the years that for most of the time that I've been involved with it, most of the members of the Labor Contracts Committee came from a single district. I thought it would be a much better situation if you could sprinkle out membership in the Labor Contracts Committee so that some people in the eastern end of the town, say Mianus, Riverside, Old Greenwich, would have a member of 2. The center might have a member of 2. The backcountry a member of 2. And the west end would have a member of 2. In order to do this, you need to expand. And expansion is what you have. It is my opinion that in a free and democratic society, more hands are better than few. You can arrive at sharper decisions, I think, if you had 7 people than you had 5. I should like to point out that when Lucia Jansen appeared as a new candidate many years ago, it was very difficult that night to get her on as an alternate. It needs new blood. It needs new people from time to time, and when you have some quite trusted people, but the number is 5, you really can hardly find a way to put new people on. So I suggest to you, for the idea of spreading the members out so that other districts have a member, vote in favor of this 7 member. I would add in District 1, most of the time labor contracts have examined an item, we had no report. There was no report that anybody had. Thank you.
David Etten, District. Well, this, oh, that's Detchen. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. It's Detchen. To be followed by Romulo Samaniego.
Three quick points. The fact of the matter is we have turnover on the Labor Contracts Committee of 1 to 2 members per term. So this is not a hierarchy that lasts forever and ever. Number 2, I've already spoken on the issue of over-concentration. It's gone, and the way to address it is not necessarily by increasing the board, but rather by addressing the issue in the context of the Appointments Committee meetings. And third, the fact of the matter is, even with the 7 members that we have, 5 plus 2, we already have substantial diversity of backgrounds. We have lawyers, we have people who have been in negotiations, we have people who have a financial background, we have people who have actuarial, we've had people with benefits experience. There is already, with 7, plenty of room for diversity of backgrounds and expertise on the LCC.
All right, Mr. Samaniego. Mr. Quigley, anything further? Ms. Swamley, anything further? Further discussion on item 6? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 6, and proceed to pull your delegation. All right. Item number 12 now comes before us. Wilma Nasinovich with that.
Good evening. Item number 12. Resolve that Section 4GI be added to the rules of the representative town meeting to read as follows. Members of the RTM should preface their remarks with the following disclaimer when they are speaking on their own behalf or presenting their own ideas publicly. The views and opinions expressed here are my own and do not necessarily represent those of the RTM or its recognized committees. I think it's self-explanatory.
All right, that being offered on behalf of our committee does not require a second and is currently before us. Ms. Lamazzo?
Public Works took this up. It was so logical for us, we hardly discussed it, and we passed it 12-0-0.
Thank you. Patty Roberts, Health and Human Services.
We took this up, and the vote was 11-0-0 to a motion to refer the item back to legislative and rules to tighten up the wording.
All right. Mr. Wells?
We took up the matter last Monday evening, and the committee has moved to refer this item back to us for some language review and changes, bringing it back for the October meeting. Our vote was 12-0-0 on the motion to refer.
Thank you. Kimberly Blank with Education.
We did not vote on the item as presented. Instead, we voted on a motion to refer the item to L&R to revise the language to address two issues. First, the term publicly is vague and overbroad and could be construed to even apply to comments made by RTM members during RTM meetings. Second, the disclaimer is only necessary if a person first identifies themselves as a member of the RTM. Our vote on the motion to refer passed 11-0-0, District 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Pirelli-Minetti with our Finance Committee report.
The Finance Committee took this up. Our vote in favor of the resolution was 8-4-0, with districts 10, 7, 6, and 3 opposed. The concerns expressed by the no votes believed that the resolution was too broad, that it was already inherent as an RTM member that you don't speak for the body, that only the body speaks for itself, and some people thought it was just creating a problem, somebody would forget to do it. But on balance, we thought that it was probably better than not. Somebody also noted that the language is, again, precatory and not mandatory, so there can't actually be a violation if you fail to do it. So those were the no votes.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you. The Appointments Committee understood that the genesis of this resolution was a concern over recent events where individuals were perceived as being representative of the entire RTM in their remarks. Although we appreciated the spirit of the resolution, there was some uncertainty over whether this would apply to making a representation with respect to constituency and district or the RTM at large. There was concern about the undermining effect this might have on RTM members when they were trying to represent their districts or their neighbors. Our vote was 7-5-0. The minority votes centered on the issue of freedom of speech. Representative from District 3 made the comment that he was elected to represent his constituency, not the RTM, and felt his resolution as written and understood could undermine that.
Richard Newman with the Town Services report.
Town Services took up this item. We voted it down 0-11-0 with District 4 absent. Some of the comments were it was too broad, it was obvious, and in some cases we thought it was good for an RTM member to be known as an RTM member when they're writing something. Thank you.
Andy Chapin, Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec took this issue up. We noted that there's really no teeth to this. There's no penalty if someone does, makes a mistake here. In general, we favor the effort towards transparency and clarity in communication. We voted 9-2-0, District 4 absent. Those who voted against felt there should be a little more specificity for the situations when this would apply.
Thank you. Josh Brown with the Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, Labor Contracts thought it was a good idea, 4-0-0.
Lucia Jansen, BOC.
This proposal was created due to the perception that certain RTM members were representing themselves in the public sphere as speaking for the entire committee or entire RTM body. This was disputed by the discussion that was had within our committee. Several BOC members had trouble with the restriction and legality of enforcement. An idea was also proposed for all town elected officials, including the first selectman, the BET, the Board of Ed, as well as RTM, follow under the same rule of disclaimer. We understand the town attorney is researching the matter, and so the vote was 1-8-2. District 10 voted yes, and District 11 abstained. Thank you.
Peter Berg with the land use report.
Land Use Committee voted unanimously 12-0-0 in support. We supported the spirit of this item, and we're confident that it'll be clarified here tonight.
Alan Small with Transportation.
Hello, your Transportation Committee voted 8-0-0 on item 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
On behalf of the committee, I move that this item be referred back to the Legislative and Rules Committee for presentment at the October meeting.
All right, and we heard Education made that, and this says Land Use did. Health and Human Services, okay. All right, so 3 of our committees are joining in this motion to refer item 12 back to Legislative and Rules. That is currently before us. Discussion on the motion to refer? I will call for a voice vote in the first instance. All those in favor of referring item 12 to the Legislative and Rules Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion to refer has carried. Item 13 now comes before us. Kimberly Blank, I believe, has that.
That's right. Hi, I'm here from the Governance Committee. Resolved that Appendix B, J of the appendix to the rules of the representative town meeting be amended to read as follows, and then it adds the following language to Section A, Town Services Committee's operational responsibilities. It adds language which says, interviews and evaluates all candidates for Labor Contracts Committee, the rest of the language as it appears in the call. The genesis of this idea was to add an additional perspective to LCC appointments. LCC members advise the RTM on labor agreements. These contracts include financial terms, as well as terms that affect benefits, work rules, and other items that create a competitive employment environment. The Governance Committee felt that it would be helpful to have a committee that could ask nominees their perspective on these broader employment issues. Although many standing committees are ultimately referred various labor contracts, the Governance Committee chose Town Services because it felt it made sense as the committee that deals with the largest number of bargaining units.
Thank you. That item 13 is now before us. Mr. Wells with the Legislative and Rules Report.
This item was not referred to us, but we took it up primarily because Mr. Bergwager from District 8 noted that there was a logistical problem with this item 13 when compared to item 18. This item amends paragraph J of the appendix to add operational responsibility for the Labor Contracts Committee to the Town Services Committee. However, even though item 18, not this item, item 18 focuses on the responsibility of the Appointments Committee, it also amends the same paragraph A relating to the Town Services Committee, but uses inconsistent language. If both items are adopted in their current form, they will constitute inconsistent provisions. We concluded that item 13 should be postponed until after action has been taken on item 18. If item 18 is adopted, it will contain the provisions covered by item 13. If 18 is not adopted, then item 13 will not conflict with it. So we would move to postpone item 13 until
later in the meeting.
Or we could do it, yeah, we could do it later in the meeting to see.
Okay.
We were going to do it till December. That was our motion, but we could also determine it. It might be difficult, but...
All right, do you want to make that motion now?
Yeah, I'll move that.
I know we have other reports pending, but we can just move it.
Okay. I move to postpone this until either the end of this meeting or the December meeting, whichever the moderator chooses.
So postpone
December.
Well, wait a minute. I thought we were just going to put it after 18 is disposed of.
We could. That's not the motion that my committee made. If the moderator...
All right, so what do you want to do?
Move it to the December meeting.
All right. Do you want to I'll ask the chairs of the committees waiting to give reports. Would you like to give your reports before we vote on this? Yes? All right. Anyone who would like to give their report, please come forward. Richard Newman, Town Services.
I will make it very quick because Town Services, who this is being referred to and being asked to vote on this, voted against it. 10-1-0 with District 4 absent. And the one district that voted no did so not because he didn't want to, he wanted to, we were voting to postpone it to December, I'm sorry, and he wanted to just shoot it down right now. So we had no interest in doing the review, didn't think we were capable, or I shouldn't say capable, we're capable, but that we weren't in the right position to review people we thought appointments should be. Thank you.
All right, so I'm sorry. So your vote was to postpone it to December? All right. Lucia Jansen?
The BOC was not referred this item, but we unanimously voted to take it up. We were strongly opposed to this. The vote was 1-10-0. District 11 voted yes. The reason why is it really was puzzling why Town Services was selected, particularly when the Education Committee has the most employees and variety of unions under it. And why wasn't Education? And therefore, why wasn't any other standing committee? And at that point, it really doesn't, we felt it was odd and not appropriate to single out a standing committee, and therefore the reason for the strong vote against having Town Services review LCC candidates.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Consistent with the discussion on item 6, the Appointments Committee understood that the purposes of this resolution was to provide the RTM with an additional perspective on LCC candidates that was not strictly from a financial perspective. We didn't have a big discussion about Town Services. We just understood it to have a broad area of responsibility and thought it appropriate, or we really didn't discuss it much. The committee discussion was strongly in support of the convention that the RTM should receive reports and perspectives from more than one committee on any item in order to receive healthy benefits and diverse analysis. A motion was made to correct the word candidates and replace it with nominees, and then our vote was 12-0-0 as amended.
All right, Mr. Brown. With the
Mr.
labor
Moderator,
contracts.
fellow members and guests, the labor contracts took this up and voted 2 in favor, 2 against. The reasons that have already been given in prior reports for the for and against were covered in our discussion as well, so 2 and 2.
Mr. Pirelli-Minetti.
Yeah, the Finance Committee took this up. Josh Brown was there from LCC. Our vote was 5 in favor, 6 opposed, 1 abstention. This was, again, it was sort of a close call, but there were some concerns that Town Services, didn't really follow these things as carefully and had not the expertise to do this. This was a very close call. Could have gone either way.
Mr. Wells.
The committee moves to postpone this item to the December meeting.
All right, discussion on the motion to postpone. I will call for a voice vote. If you are in favor, you will vote yes. If you are opposed to postponing this to December and want to take this up tonight, you should vote no. All those in favor of postponing item 13 to our December meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion is carried. Item 13 is postponed. Item 14 now comes before us. Let me give you the vote on item 6. This was expanding labor contracts to 7 members. Those in favor, 127. Opposed, 61. That item is carried. Item 14 now comes before us. Betsy Fruman with that.
On behalf of the Special Committee on Governance, we present item 14, which outlines the procedure for a second reading, and it is as it appears in the call.
All right, item 14 is now before us. May we want to give the report of the Governance Committee?
There are certain items that are too important to be dealt with on one reading. So the Governance Committee has put before you the idea that anything that is a charter change, a rules change, or a petition brought by 20 citizens should go through a procedure of a second reading, meaning that it would come before you, you would hear reports, committees would look at it, but you would not vote on it at that meeting. It would then go again through the cycle, and you would vote on it at the second meeting. Always remember that there's provision to suspend the rules. If something is an emergency, the rules can be suspended and to avoid the second reading and to vote on it first time round.
Thank you. Mr. Wells with Legislative and Rules report.
We took this item up, and in the spirit of the second reading rule, we will be moving to postpone this to October, but we would like to make some language changes now so that they will appear in the printed call next time so that we know exactly what it is that we'll be voting on. On page 7 of the call, paragraph 6, a second reading procedure, it says be in place. We change that to shall apply so that it reads a second reading procedure shall apply for any resolution that. The rest of it is. And then at the end of, at the top of page 8, subparagraph B, the sentence that ends, discussion on the item will be appropriate. We included language, motions to amend the proposed resolution may be voted upon at that meeting. In the next line, subparagraph C, we included the language, the call of between on and the, so it reads that the moderator will then place the item on the call of the next regularly scheduled meeting. And then finally, in subparagraph E, the proposed resolution may be then considered. Committee reports deleted the word discussion and inserted delivered, comma, discussed, comma, amended, so that it reads committee reports delivered, comma, discussed, amended as desired. And with those changes, our vote was 12-0-0. And then we moved to refer the matter back to us for the second reading. 12-0-0 to motion to postpone to October.
All right, Mr. Berg, you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Land Use did vote unanimously to take up item 14, and we voted to refer the resolution to Legislative and Rules Committee to include language requiring a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules to avoid a second reading of resolutions that really do not require 2 readings. So just to clarify there, that there be a 2/3 vote that would suspend the rules of the first meeting to avoid the second reading. And our vote on that was 12-0-0.
All right, hang on a minute. So your motion, you have a motion to refer this to Legislative and Rules?
Yes, sir.
With certain directions?
Yes. So the specific request is that if rules are to be suspended to avoid a second reading, that motion to suspend require a two-thirds vote.
Well, that's what a motion to suspend requires.
Well, whoever made this, they may not have known that. So,
Well, I'm telling you, that's what Robert's Rules provides.
so
You
land
might have
use
heard me say
voted
that
to...
at the beginning of this meeting. And it's not debatable, a motion to suspend the rules.
Thank you. We voted to refer the resolution to legislative and rules. Our vote on that was 12-0-0.
All right. So why don't we take that up first? Mr. Wells, you have any comment on taking the motion to refer? Seems to me if we postpone it, it's just going to come back. Now, I know you wanted to change this, but if we refer it to you, then you'll be able to make whatever changes you want.
That's right. And that
So
we'd hope that...
if we don't refer it, then I'll go to your motion to amend and then postpone.
I'd prefer that you go to the motion to amend so that we have this language before us when we go back.
Okay. So legislative and rules, we'll take up the legislative rules motion to amend this by adding, I think you said in subsection B, Bravo, that a motion to amend may be voted on?
Motions, yes. As well.
And you inserted the word call and see and something about discussed, delivered, whatever.
Right. And by the way, these motions, these
Delivered,
amendments were
discussed, right.
circulated to the body.
All right, do we need to have that repeated? Is there any objection to that motion to amend? That may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Mr. Berg, you want to make your motion to refer?
Well, again, since that was the vote, I'm making the motion to refer it to legislative and rules.
All right. So now we're taking up the Land Use Committee motion to refer item 14 to legislative and rules. Discussion on that motion to refer. All right, I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor of referring item 14 to legislative and rules, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 15 now comes before us. Mr. McKnight.
Resolve that Section 6C3 be added to the rules of the representative town meeting to read as follows. Any subcommittee formed to study a proposed ordinance be comprised of a minimum of 5 RTM members. Considering input from our poll of suggestions, along with the tremendous workload of a two-person committee, we felt a minimum of 5 to study something as important as an ordinance was appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 15 is currently before us. May we have the committee reports? We'll begin with Mr. Berg and the Land Use Committee.
So our vote on this item was 10 in favor, 2 opposed, District 8 and 12. There is concern that a lack of 5 members may thwart the formation of a necessary research committee.
Thank you. Kimberly Blank with the Education Report.
Hi, Education voted for this item 11-0-0 with District 2 absent. We didn't have a lot of discussion on it, but generally felt that it was good practice. Some people expressed concern about the ability to find 5 people in all cases, but generally felt that if we're going to pass a new law, we should at least be able to find 5 members interested in researching and drafting it.
Thank you. Patty Roberts with the Health and Human Services Report.
We took this up. The vote was 11-0-0, District 3 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Pirelli-Minetti.
Yes, the Finance Committee took this up. We looked at this. A lot of people were concerned that this really should apply to all committees, but that it should be advisory or precatory and not mandatory. So our committee voted 10-0 to amend the motion to delete the words "formed to study a proposed ordinance," and so it would now read, "Any subcommittee should be comprised of at least 5 RTM members." And that motion, that amended motion, was passed 10-0.
Thank you.
So we'll be making that amendment.
Mr. Newman, Town Services Report.
Okay. So, Town Services took this up, and we discussed what was just mentioned of the referring it back. We had a problem with that since Town Services sets up 12 or 13 different budget subcommittees for the budget process, and that would mean we would need 5 people for each one of our budget subcommittees if we allowed that to go through. So we would like the word ordinance to stay in it. We also would like the word shall to be added after. Any subcommittee formed to study a proposed ordinance shall be comprised of a minimum of 5 RTM members. We voted 11-0-0, District 4 absent as amended with the word shall.
Thank you. Lucia Johnson.
The BOC members recalled the fracking committee, which had only 2 members, and it was far too small, and to do the necessary work was very difficult for 2 members, and one BOC member tried to reach members of that subcommittee. It was very difficult. So the BOC easily favored having the minimum of 5 members. The vote was 11-0-0, District 4 absent.
Andy Chapin with Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec generally thought this was a good idea. We voted 9-1-1, District 4 absent. Those that were not in favor of this idea felt that it was micromanaging and that different committees or different subcommittees might have different requirements.
Alan Small with Transportation.
The Transportation Committee voted 8-0-0 on this item. Thank you very much.
Doug Wells, Legislative and Rules.
Like Town Services Committee, we also moved to add the word shall between ordinance and B. So it reads, formed to study a proposed ordinance shall be comprised of minimum of 5 members. We then voted on it as amended. Our vote was 9-1. District 6 and 12 voted no. District 3 abstained.
All right, so we have 2 proposed amendments, one saying it should apply to all and uses the word should, and then the other to add shall. So let's take up the Finance Committee motion to amend. Mr. Pirelli-Minetti.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee moves that item 15 should be amended by deleting the words formed to study a proposed ordinance and inserting in its place the word should. And so it would now read, any subcommittee should be comprised of a minimum of 5 RTM members. Thank you.
All right, that being offered on behalf of our Finance Committee, it does not require a second. So this is to make it broadly applicable, but not mandatory. Discussion on the Finance Committee motion to amend item 15. Mr. Wells.
I don't think this is a particularly good idea. There are many subcommittees that wouldn't necessarily need 5 members. I think when you're dealing with an ordinance, it's something that's going to change the law in our town, and there should be more members, but any subcommittee taking up any issue shouldn't necessarily be comprised of 5 people. So I'd urge you to vote this down.
Further discussion on this Finance Committee motion to amend. Allison Walsh.
Hi. At Legislative and Rules, I abstained because I wasn't sure how I felt about this. I do think it's great if we have bigger subcommittees. I think that's more of an issue of how the bill is initially going to be referred out of committee, to which committees it's referred, and who's setting up the subcommittee, what type of subcommittee it is. We are not paid legislators, and so we can't be forced to be on a subcommittee to accept a subcommittee assignment. We do it voluntarily, and so for that reason, I think that the word shall should be changed to should, and I agree with Finance.
Mr. Newman.
Again, per my previous comments, Town Services could not function if we had to have 5 members of each subcommittee for the budget. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Finance Committee motion to amend. Mr. Detchen.
I'm not sure whether we're using standard English or legal English, but I wonder if our esteemed town attorney has an opinion on whether there really is a distinction between the word shall and the word should. Is one, in fact, not an obligation, or could one construe the word should to mean, yes, each one should have X number, and in fact, it is a mandate, not an option?
All right, well, we're intending it to be not mandatory. Further discussion on the Finance Committee motion. All right. Pardon me?
Can you repeat the motion?
Yes. All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Finance Committee motion to amend item 15. The motion is to delete the words "formed to study a proposed ordinance" and replace that phrase with the word "should," so that it will now read, any subcommittee should be comprised of a minimum of 5 RTM members. If you are in favor of that change, you should vote yes on this vote. If you oppose it, you should vote no. So please proceed to poll your delegation.
Hello, fellow members. So, you know, there is a draft plan of conservation and development that we will be voting on one of these days. There is a meeting coming up at the high school to brief you. There was a pile of the plans on the table out front, but I know they're all gone. If you would like one, you can pick one up at Town Hall on the second floor in the Planning and Zoning office. And I think you will find it interesting reading. So, and please do attend that meeting.
When is it?
So it's is it this Thursday? It's this Thursday at 7 o'clock at the in the auditorium, the new auditorium at the high school.
All right, another public service announcement. We mentioned earlier about filing forms. Everyone should have received this SEEC form number 1 in connection. Anyone who is running for the RTM in November needs to file this. So please, there is a penalty involved if you do not. So we don't want that to happen. If you have not already, the deadline for filing as a candidate was today to get on the ballot. So please get this in if you have not already filed it. We have the result of the vote on the Finance Committee motion to broaden the applicability of item 15. Those in favor, 57, opposed, 121, abstaining 2. That item has failed. All right, we had legislative rules and town services. They are moving to add the word shall to item 15, which would make the item rule read, any subcommittee formed to study a proposed ordinance shall be comprised of a minimum of 5 RTM members. So that is a motion on behalf of our committees, is currently before us. I can represent that the intent of the Governance Committee was to make that provision mandatory. The addition of shall makes that clear. So I view this as a procedural change, and I will call for a voice vote on the motion to amend by adding the word shall. If you are in favor of adding the word shall, you vote yes. If you are opposed, you vote no. All those in favor of the Legislative and Rules and Town Services motion to amend item 15, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion has carried. Item 6, all right, so I'm sorry, so now we have amended it. We now must take a record vote on item 15 as amended. So will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 15 as amended, and please proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, let's see. I have announced all the votes we have taken so far, I believe. Right? All right. Item 16 now comes before us. Mr. Small, Alan Small has that resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the Governance Committee, item 16, resolved that Section 3N be added to the rules of the representative town meeting. And what that item does is state that RTM members shall be issued town email addresses by the Town of Greenwich's IT department to be used for all official RTM business. The item is as it reads in the call.
All right, that item is now before us, having been offered by our Governance Committee. Any report beyond that, Mr. Small, you would like to offer?
Yes, please. Mr. Moderator, members, as was mentioned earlier by the League of Women Voters representative, this was a recommendation that they had in their report, and the RTM has voted on this item previously. But in doing so, my recollection is that it was voted mostly on the issue of cost, that it was going to cost something, and members could use a different email and just carbon copy the town clerk. Some other issues have been raised about the requirements under FOIA, under Freedom of Information Act, as well as record retention for 2 years after any email is sent. That could impact that. And it's been noted by several people that many RTM members use business email addresses rather than an independent email address. I think that rather than cost, security is the prime issue that we discussed in the Governance Committee, and that security now is very important, especially in government emails, and I would ask members to consider that more than cost. Currently, there are 59 members of the RTM that have town-issued emails, so it's about a quarter of this group. And I personally have a town-issued email. I can tell you that it's very easy to add to your iPhone. It's very easy to access on your computer. And I get very little spam, which is an additive bonus of having the town-issued email. Another item that the League of Women Voters advocated for was increasing accessibility to RTM members. And if you look at the format that RTM town-issued emails of the first name dot last name at Greenwich CT, it's very easy for members of the public and even other RTM members to be able to email other members. And so I think on that issue alone, it should be taken up and approved, because it will increase accessibility to the community. Another thing I can report is that the Transportation Committee did take this item up. We weren't assigned it, and we voted 8-0-0 to accept the issuance of town emails. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wells.
The only thing I will add is that we were told that the RTM is the only body within the town government that is not using emails issued by the town. Our vote on this was 12-0-0.
Mr. Newman?
Town Services took this item up again. We voted it down this time, as we did last time when it came to us. Our vote this time was 1 for it and 10 opposed. We work with the IT department. That's one of our overseas. The cost is substantial. The turnover in the RTM is substantial. The views of many of the users of the town emailer is it's not as simple and easy to use as some of the other emails. It's hard to attach documents to. You get limited on I can't tell you exactly because I don't use it. I use a Gmail account, which was free. We thought, again, for the cost, we do not believe it's any easier to find someone in a directory with a at greenwichct.org than it is at gmail.com. It's in a directory. Look in the directory. You'll find everyone's email. For us, again, it was cost, ease. We also did not believe it's any more secure than for users or the town than any other email. Thank you.
Hold up, sir. No. I have a speaker list. I'm going to go to the speaker list. Yara Burnett. Thank you. To be followed by Jenny Baird.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am with the League of Women Voters. Therefore, I thank the previous speaker for giving us a little shout out. Obviously, I'm here to support this item. During our 2.5-year study of the RTM, the League has had a first-hand experience in the difficulty of reaching a number of RTM members, duly elected representatives to this important board. As an organization that believes that members should be more aware of what's going on in town and the important work of the RTM, we feel that it is absolutely essential that RTM members be easily reached. There's the security item, which I think cannot be overlooked because official items on your private emails should be archived by the town, and there could be severe consequences if they are not, which we would hope would not occur. Finally, if the Greenwich High School students can all have a town issue email address, I don't see why the RTM could not. If it costs a little bit of money, I think it's well worth it. So I urge you to support this item.
Thank you. Jenny Baird, to be followed by Liz Perry.
Hello, I'm Jenny Baird. I'm the Vice Chair of the Moderator Special Committee on Technology. We as a group, I'm speaking on behalf of the group, we generally agree that it is in the best interest of the town of Greenwich, members of the RTM, and the community at large for RTM members to have standardized email accounts distinct from their personal email that are dedicated to RTM business. That said, we have concerns about this proposal. In January of 2018, a similar item was brought before the RTM and voted down. Given the resistance of so many RTM members to adopting the town's email technology, we explored 3 potential solutions to email with the goal of addressing specific FOIA and usability requirements and challenges. The first was do nothing, which is what we're currently doing. The second was enforce town emails at a cost of approximately $25,000 annually, which is the proposal on the table. And third, which we would have recommended up till now, is recommend town emails or a personal Gmail standard that is set up to automatically CC the record at Town of Greenwich email address. Based on our previous inconclusive conversations with the town's attorneys, we decided that option 3 was a reasonable solution. The Governance Committee has framed this as a FOIA requirement. The fact is, if there were a FOIA request for information from any RTM member who does not have a town-issued email address or who has not consistently CC'd the record email address, that would be hugely inconvenient for the individual RTM member, as they would need to provide access to their personal computer or device and email accounts. But that is a burden that individuals would have taken on, knowing full well that potential inconvenience. That said, there's a second legal issue which may be a bigger liability, and that is the state's electronic records retention regulation, which requires the town to maintain electronic records for 2 years after they were issued. This is a case where the town may well need to produce an email history for someone who is no longer involved with the RTM or who may not even live in Greenwich anymore. While this scenario could potentially be managed by the same clunky email system that auto-CCs record at, we on the Technology Advisory Group would like to revisit this proposal with the town attorney and also revisit the implementation plan for any town email program to ensure that if town emails are required, the town IT department can manage a bring your own device policy that the RTM requires, and also provide setup and support in non-daytime business hours to support RTM members who are not able to make it to town hall during the traditional workday to set up their
30
accounts.
seconds.
The entire process of setting up a town email account needs to be as frictionless as possible for members of this body. If we approve this measure tonight, we are in for a headache. The current system is simply not set up for this change at the moment. We propose this item be referred to referred to the Moderator Special Committee on Technology, and we will bring it back before this body only when we can confidently support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz Perry? What, you pass? All right. So, excuse me, Ms. Baird, so you are making a motion to refer this? All right. So, Ms. Baird has made a motion to refer item 16 to the Technology Advisory Group, which was a group of interested RTM members who formed to look into technology-related issues. And Ms. Baird, can you tell us the size of that group, approximately? Approximately 8? Okay. You said you were the vice chair, and the chair is? Bob Brady, right. Okay. Bob Brady is not a member. That's why this is not, it's called the Technology Advisory Group. It is not an RTM committee officially. All right, so is there a second to that motion? Second. It's been moved and seconded to refer item 16 to the Technology Advisory Group. Discussion on that motion to refer. Question. Anyone care to discuss that? All right, again, it is a procedural vote. I will, in the first instance, call for a voice vote. If you are in favor of referring item 16 to the to the Technology Advisory Group, you vote yes. Well, hang on. If you want to take this up tonight, you would vote no. All those in favor of referring item 16 to the Technology Advisory Group, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. That item is now disposed of. All right, I have the result of the vote on item 15 as amended. And that was the subcommittees being 5 members. Those in favor, 140, opposed 34, abstaining 2. That item has carried. All right. Mr. Cornelius, you have item 17?
Yes.
All right.
Resolved that Section 3, 1, 4B, and 4C of the Rules of the Representative Town Meeting be amended for voting procedures. The Governance Committee is recommending that all voting cards must be marked by each RTM member when voting. That means no thumbs up or no thumbs down votes to the chairman of that district. Accuracy is very important when taking votes on such important matters, and we'd like to have that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 17 is now before us for consideration. Mr. Wells with the report of the Legislative and Rules Committee.
We took up this item and made some language changes which consist of adding one sentence at the beginning of subparagraph 1. And our vote after making these changes was 12-0-0. We also took up a motion to reinstate paragraph 4B2, which the Governance Committee is moving to delete, but that motion failed 2-9-1. So the changes, if you're ready to hear those at this point, Mr. Moderator.
Yep.
The changes are at the beginning of subparagraph B1, which states the district chairman shall first. We added this sentence: the district chairman, in the singular, shall not begin to record the vote until after the moderator has called for the vote. Then in the next sentence, we changed chairman, plural, to chairman, and the same change, chairmen, in the next sentence, chairman. Our vote on these motions was 12-0-0, and then on the merits as amended, 12-0-0. One other change, I'm sorry. Since paragraph B2 is being deleted by the Governance Committee, then there's no need for the number 1 in parentheses in the preceding paragraph. And the only other change, we deleted the word through in the second paragraph. The district chairman shall first strike, take out the word through, so it'll read, the district chairman shall first strike from the voting record, and the rest of it as it appears.
So you want to reinstate paragraph 2 in its entirety with that change?
No, we're not.
The first sentence?
No, we're leaving 4B2 deleted in its entirety. What we added at the beginning of paragraph 1 was the sentence, the district chairman shall not begin to record the vote until after the moderator has called for the vote. Then we made the 2 changes in the next 2 sentences from chairman to chairman, and then deleted the word through from that sentence that says the district chairman shall first strike from the voting record by taking out the word through.
Okay. All right. So that is a motion to amend item 17. Discussion on that motion. Is there any objection? I'm sorry, Mr. Broadhurst.
Instead of chairman, shouldn't it just be chair?
Mr. Wells, do you have any objection to that? No. All right, is there any objection to amending? We are currently considering a motion to amend which changed chairman to chairman, and now Mr. Broadhurst has moved and it has been seconded to amend that to chair. Is there any objection to Mr. Broadhurst's motion? All right, so it shall read chair. Now, is there any objection to the legislative and rules proposed changes to item 17? Hearing none, they may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Further discussion on item 17. Betsy Fruman, District 9.
At our meeting on Thursday, September 12th, District 9 voted to propose the following amendment to call item 17. We are reinstating 2, but adding to it for items on a combined or consent calendar. The district chair may first delete it, then the rest of it is the same. The explanation for that is that during the current term of the RTM, there were 15 combined or consent record votes. In those 15 votes, there were only 6 no votes. If a chair prefers to poll his district, he should be allowed to do so for combined or consent items.
All right, so this is offered on behalf of the district, and the proposal is to take out in the alternative and replace, this is for B2, Going to reinstate that, but take out in the alternative and put for items on the consent or combined calendars, and then the rest of it remains the same. Is that correct?
It's the chair may.
Oh, so change shall to may?
Yes, may. Well,
Okay.
I'm not, I don't know the legal fees for this.
That's correct. So
And-
you're saying they could still pass it around?
They can still pass it.
All right. So this provision about polling and exhibiting is for the thumbs up, thumbs down procedure, essentially.
Allowing thumbs up and thumbs down for combined and consent items.
Okay. Does everybody understand the District 9 motion? All right. Discussion on that motion to amend. Is there any objection? Mr. Wells?
Well, I guess the only thing I would point out is if you do this, and I don't care one way or another whether this passes, since that 2 is going back in, then you should reinsert 1 at the beginning, since it is an alternative way of voting. We took out paragraph 1 in the changes that I made. They'd have to be.
All right. So you're saying we just had subsection B without a numbered designation subparagraph under it?
Yeah, we took out the number 1 because 2 was going to be gone. Now it's being reinstated, so you'd want to put 1 back.
All right, but
in
on the
if
call,
this passes.
the 1 is still there. It's not struck. So, all right. There's no other unintended consequence with language by putting this back in? So we'll have B1 and B2. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Wells? Yes. All right. Any other discussion on the District 9 motion to amend? Mr. Broadhurst.
As a member of the Governance Committee, we spent a lot of time on this. The League of Women Voters felt very strongly that every member should vote the way they feel. On a card, they should make their own marks. There have been allegations in the past of mistakes being made with people thumbs up, thumbs down. The Governance Committee felt, not unanimously, but they felt fairly strongly that everybody should mark their own card. I don't see a problem with it. I don't see why we need to carve out the combined or consent calendars in this. Everybody should vote, sign their card.
Yara Burnett, did you want to be heard?
Thank you again. It's late. I'm just going to say the accuracy of a delegate's vote should be very important to him or her. It is important to the citizens. Therefore, I feel it should be mandatory that you mark your own cards. Thank you.
Further discussion? Wilma Nasinovich?
I see no problem in allowing the chairman to decide if they want to use thumbs up or thumbs down. Our district has used it for decades, and we never have had one problem.
Further discussion? David Detchen.
Accuracy is not an issue on consent and combined items.
Thank you. Further discussion? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? District 9, motion to amend item 17. We are just voting on the motion to amend. If you want the rules to allow for the thumbs up, thumbs down procedure for consent and combined items, you should vote yes on this motion to amend. If you want to bar it for everything, vote no. Please proceed to poll your delegation. Who has a point of information? Yes, sir. No? I mean, there's no rule in effect to, the question was, is there a set time to adjourn this meeting? And the answer is, we have not adopted such a rule. We do adopt a rule at our May budget meeting, but have not done so for tonight's meeting. We must await the result of this vote before we can take a final vote on item 17. So I ask that you expedite the voting on District 9's motion to amend. We have the result of the vote on the District 9 motion to amend item 17. Those in favor, 52. Opposed, 115. Abstaining, 1. That motion has failed. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item 17, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right. We have remaining 18 through 23. But before I call, so we're going to continue with the business while we're voting on item 17. But before I call for 18, Susan Fahey, Chair of District 11, is asked to be recognized.
Good evening. I wanted to make a motion to postpone numbers 18 through 23 to the October meeting. I know Finance was going to postpone some of them to December, but in October they can postpone them to December. So I wanted to make a motion to postpone numbers 18 through 23 to the October meeting.
It has been moved and seconded to postpone items 18 through 23 to our October meeting. Discussion on the motion to postpone. I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing the remaining items on our agenda to our October meeting, those remaining items being 18 through 23, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, so we cannot adjourn at the moment. We must await the result of the vote on item 17. But this will be our last vote. We have the result of the vote on item 17 regarding voting procedures. Those in favor, 141, opposed 17, abstaining 3. That item has carried. That being the end of the items on our agenda tonight. This meeting stands adjourned. I thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.